Okay, can everyone hear me all right? Yeah, awesome. Okay, welcome everybody to the final talk of day 4 of the MIDA Industry Talks Week. This one's a super exciting one, as some of you may have met her already today in some of the workshops or panel discussions. But it's my distinct pleasure to welcome to speak for us this evening Resh Sidhu, who, I missed that bit off, you are the Immersive Creative Director at AKQA, formerly Creative Director at Framestore, and Resh has worked on some fantastic projects, including for clients such as Nissan, some Marvel stuff as well, some, is it Nestle as well? I saw some Nestle
Marvel,
ads.
Nestle.
Yeah, so a wide, diverse range of immersive and interactive products. So, if everyone could just give a big, warm round of applause. Welcome, Resh, to the stage.
Thank you. Let's try this. Can you guys hear me? Is that good? Is that clear? Yeah? Fantastic. All right, thank you for having me today. I can spot some of the MR, VR students in the back there. So I will say that I actually went through a much more detailed version of this talk with them earlier on today, so you guys can have a nap in the back if you want, because a lot of what I took them through today I've got here in this session. But there are some different projects in there, so you can wake up at that time. Thanks for having me. Like Dan said, I've really enjoyed today. I've really enjoyed being here with the students and the energy and the atmosphere, and it's kind of what I miss about being at university, this insatiable appetite for learning. And what I want to share with you today is some of the things that I've learned since I've left university, which was many years ago. And I've been dabbling in what I call the dark arts of VR for about 5-6 years now. I'm going to share some of the projects that we've worked on, some of the things that we've learnt, so that hopefully if any of you are working in the creative space, in the virtual space, in the AR and MR space, that you can take some of those learnings with you and some of those lessons and really arm yourselves so you guys are ready for this, something which I call the age of immersion, which is what we're in right now. So just a little bit of background about AKQA. Now, AKQA is a digital agency. We've been around for over 18 years. And we are an agency that is all about ideas and innovation. So our work is constantly being recognized over the years for having a very pioneering approach. We are at the intersection of art, science, and technology, where we take those 3 elements and combine them together to help brands really create experiences that connect with consumers and add value to consumers' lives. But everything that we do is about creating a purpose and creating something that really resonates and is memorable. And we've been an agency, as I said, for over 18 years, and immersion and creating immersive experiences has always been part of our DNA. Now, whether it was using the internet to create immersive, interactive websites back in the day when everybody wanted a website, or whether it was to create immersive experiences on mobile, or even out there in the real world, digital experiences that engage and enrich people's lives. So it was always going to be something when VR and AR technology kind of made its way into the studio that we were going to take it and embrace it and find ways to use it. What I wanted to share with you is a little bit of a sizzle that I've put together, which just focuses on some of the immersive work that we've been doing in the past few years. So as you can see, we've kind of been lucky enough to work with some amazing brands, especially in the immersive space. We've focused our area on helping brands navigate this realm, because the conversation around VR and AR and MR and XR and any other R that's going to come over the next few years can be quite overwhelming and can be quite confusing. So our goal is to really help brands and clients understand how to navigate the space and create content that really is of value. Now, we've been creating experiences, everything from the Jack Ryan experience at Comic-Con in New York, where you had to use Alexa to help you get out of an escape room, or the Eurostar project that I'm going to talk to you about shortly, how we used children's imagination, so when they travelled on the Eurostar, they actually saw and we brought to life some of the creatures that they may or thought they would encounter along the way. Now, I've been working with Nike and Volvo and brands like Converse to help them understand what does all of this mean and how can they create experiences that really resonate. But it's been a huge learning curve. It's been one that is both exciting and scary all at the same time. And you know, we're lucky enough to work with brands that are brave enough to embrace this new medium and understand that you may not get the ROI that you might get from other mediums, but they're brave enough and bold enough to try things and see if they resonate and really have impact and value. So learning how to navigate this space has been super challenging. And for me, the story really began back in 2012. Now, some of you who have been playing in the VR space will recognize this. This is the first headset launched by Oculus. At the time, they were not bought by Facebook. And this is known as the DK1 headset. Now, we were lucky enough at the time, was in AKQA London, and we had backed this Kickstarter program. We were always on Kickstarter looking at really cool technology, what things could we back and buy, what kind of prototypes would we get into the office, is it anything that we could use with any of the projects that we were going through, could it help solve any of the business challenges we were looking at for some of our clients. I remember the day this came into the office, and it was really like receiving a James Bond suitcase. It came in, we were kind of excited because really truly when we invested on Kickstarter, we didn't actually expect to receive a prototype of anything. It landed in the office and we kind of opened up this black suitcase, there was nothing on it, and there was this kind of headset and these cables and these wires, and we put it all together very quickly and popped it on our heads. And I was sharing with the students this morning, it was mesmerizing what happened. Now at the time, there were only about 3 experiences that you could actually try on the DK1. One of which, as I'm sure you've seen endless videos of, was a roller coaster. So that was the first thing I tried, and I was blown away. I literally, legs turned to jelly. I was so excited. We grabbed everybody in the office who was around. We grabbed our CEO, we grabbed our finance director. We just grabbed everybody and said, you've got to come and try this. Because I really wanted to see, was it just me? Was I just going crazy? Or was everybody going to have the same reaction? And lo and behold, everybody had the same reaction. Falling off the stool, completely mesmerized by what it was. And I remember at the end of the day, we kind of closed the case, and part of my heart was just beating because for the first time, and I'd been, you know, a creative director for many years, worked in every single medium you could imagine. I'd never seen anything have that impact, that much of an impact on someone. So for us, it was like this little black box of delight, and we kind of closed the box and we all looked at each other, and being creatives, we said, we've really got to find a client that's going to let us use this for something. And I remember our head of technology at the time was like, close it, Resh. What are we going to be able to use it for? Because it was so new at the time. And then lo and behold, it was only a few weeks later that I was on the phone to this client. So at the time, we'd been working with Nissan. And it was almost the universe was bringing 2 of the best things together for me. So we had this amazing headset, which I was so excited about. And then we had this client who rang me up and said, hey, Resh, we've got this brief for you. Need it turned around really quickly. We need to be at the Tokyo Motor Show in 12 weeks. And we want to do something a little bit different. We want to reach a younger audience. How do we do that? And I was like, okay. You want to reach a younger audience in Tokyo, in Japan. Maybe this new technology that no one had ever heard of, no one had seen, maybe that could be a segue in. So we actually concepted and pitched an idea within the next 2 weeks, flew to Japan with that little magic box of delights, pitched an idea to the client, they bought the idea, I think it was two things. Firstly, they were mesmerized by the roller coaster. And bear in mind, I only showed them a roller coaster, and our idea was not to do a roller coaster. But also the fact that we only had 12 weeks. By that time, we only had 10 weeks to make it. So it was almost like leap of faith. Don't have much time. We trust you, Resh. Go for it. We kind of came back to the office, looking at it, going, "Oh my goodness, we have no idea." We have a piece of technology that was very much new. No one had ever designed in it before for a client. We hadn't built anything within it. So all we had was our years of experience in working within immersive technologies. And so pretty quickly we created the first consumer-facing experience. In 2013, this experience debuted at the Tokyo Motor Show, and we could never have imagined the impact it would have had. I'm going to play the case study video so you can get a little bit of a flavor of what we did, but then I'm going to actually show you some of the detail around how we made it and the things that we learned from it. Oh, didn't play. Let's go back.
For 80 years, Nissan has been looking to the future to stay at the cutting edge of automotive design.
Oh, it's not working.
In 2013, we helped Nissan revolutionize their creative.
Going to try that one more time, and if it doesn't, we can skip it. So even old technology doesn't work. All right, bear with me 1 second.
For 80 years. For 80 years,
There we go.
Nissan has been looking to the future to stay at the cutting edge of automotive design. In 2013, we helped Nissan revolutionize their creative process once again, inviting young drivers to design their own concept car at the Tokyo Motor Show. This is Nissan IDX. Nissan IDX makes the complex process of car design simple. In an exclusive partnership with 3D virtual reality pioneers Oculus VR, we created an intuitive design tool that allowed anyone to become a car designer. A team of 3D artists, game developers, and psychologists developed a series of immersive arenas, each one symbolizing a stage of car creation. Picking up the virtual reality headset transported motor show visitors into the virtual world. By looking at objects that appealed the most to them, users journeyed through the design process. These decisions, which reflected their personality and driving style, created their own unique IDX design. The response to Nissan IDX was overwhelming, causing 70-minute queues and producing over 2,000 unique car designs over 9 days. But most importantly, the 240 hours of engagement has given Nissan unique insight into their customers' vision for future cars, so they can stay at the cutting edge of automotive design for years to come.
So the goal for Nissan was to attract a younger audience at the Tokyo Motor Show, generate buzz and excitement, and get people talking about their stand and their experience. And this did exactly that, but it went beyond that. All of the participants that tried the VR experience, we collected all of that data for Nissan. All of their car designs, all of their interactions were then actually aggregated together and turned into a concept car. So it was a really transformative way for Nissan to think about car design and think about involving a new generation into that process. Now, this is just some of the behind the scenes peek of the process and the creative process that we went through when we begun designing or even putting a team together. We did a tremendous amount of learning along the way. So bear in mind, this was 2012. The only VR experiences that we had to measure against were the roller coaster, and there was a couple of other kind of, environments through which you could navigate around. So we were trying to apply our old schools of the creative process to this kind of whole new medium, and it wasn't working. We had to change the way we worked, we had to change the teams that we put together, and we had to think outside of the box super quickly. So trying to understand and build an engaging narrative within the virtual space is very different and very challenging. In the early days, we were drawing up these storyboards, and we realized that actually drawing a frame was completely opposite to what you're trying to do in VR. There is no frame. we ditched all of that pretty quickly, and we actually started prototyping very quickly into the 3D space. And we learned that that was the best way to storyboard our way through this experience. The team that we put together, the team that I put together for this, was a team that I never imagined or fathomed. We had game designers, psychologists, we had theatrical performers who were used to writing for theatre, helping us understand how do you tell a story when now you are no longer telling it within a frame, but you are telling it within a 360-degree space. So the things that we learned were a tremendous learning curve, and we produced it in 8 weeks. We were highly adventurous. As you can tell, as you hear from the video, and even now when I watch that video back, my heart, I kind of go, oh, why did we even imagine that we could do that? We totally bit off more than we could chew, because it was the first time we were creating something within this new medium. We didn't know how long things were going to take. We didn't know that when we sketched an idea on paper, it sounded really great, but as soon as we put it into VR and somebody went on it, it made them feel sick. And we had to find a way to problem solve that. So surrounding myself with a team that was very diverse in its skill set, from developers, from technicians, from artists, from storytellers, writers, was fundamental in actually getting this to the Tokyo Motor Show and it being the success it was. One of the most important things that we learned is we did test within VR all the way. People's reactions at Tokyo Motor Show totally knocked us for six. And it was at that point, and I remember being there and seeing all these kids like dragging their parents and forcing them to like queue up. Who queues up for that long? And their parents queued up for them because they wanted to try this cool new thing. So the hook and the lure of a new technology can really drive an audience to your experience. But what we fundamentally learned was people really enjoyed designing their own cars. They really enjoyed that process. Right down there in the bottom right-hand corner is actually the Nissan's concept car designer. So when he was trying the experience, I just completely had in mind, but I was like, the Nissan concept car designer is concepting a car in my VR experience. This is crazy. But it changed the way also Nissan's designers work. So they now use VR in their concept, in the process when they're designing cars, not only to engage a new audience, but also to help them and the creative process. At this point, I remember feeling like we'd only barely scratched the surface of what was possible, and I spent the rest of my time since then learning as much as I could about VR and AR, and really building teams that can help create some of the experiences that, when you take that headset off, cause this type of reaction where people are so excited and mesmerized by it that they want to grab the person next to them and make them go through the same experience. We'd barely scratched the surface of what was possible, and we'd achieved that in 8 to 12 weeks, which was amazing. And subsequently have spent the rest of the time, again, just learning and producing experiences that generate this value and create something that's truly memorable. So fast forwarding, a number of years, this is a recent experience that we've done with our team, our AKQA team in Paris for Eurostar. Has anyone been on the Eurostar? Yay, right, how cool is that, right? So Eurostar is really great. So Eurostar is one of the clients for the Paris office, and it was really interesting. So the Eurostar came to AKQA and said, look, what we found when we do research about when kids and families travel on the Eurostar is that the younger kids always ask their parents the same question. They're super excited about going on the Eurostar. And I kind of said to them, well, I ask myself the same question, not just kids, but will I get to see the fish when I go under the sea? And so we took that one little insight and we created this immersive experience where children could travel on the Eurostar and use VR in a way to transport them to a completely different world. And I'm going to just take you through, just play the little film here for you. One of the things that we do with all of the VR experiences that we make is every experience for us, every project is a learning lesson. And we apply everything that we've learned from one experience to the next, so that each experience can be evolved and improved. Things that we learn, that what resonates with people. One of the things that we learned, an invaluable lesson from day one, is people love being in a completely different world, but they hate it when they can't participate in that world. They not only want to be somewhere different, they want to be involved in the story. They want to interact, they want to move, they want to touch things. And so that interaction and creating that interaction was really important to us in this experience. So here's a little glimpse of what happened.
We are going on a train to France underwater. Can you see fish through the windows?
Yeah, it's cool. You can just connect it to the train's Wi-Fi for free. That's what I think it's called. Just add it to your phone. It's actually quite cool. Isn't it?
It's so simple, it's amazing.
So Odyssey is an underwater kind of adventure. And what we created was this onboard entertainment system for Eurostar. So what they did is they gave families and parents Google Cardboard. Families were able to take their phone, download the app, pop that into the cardboard, and then give that to their children. But as I said, one of the things that we really wanted to do was make sure that when the team first started doing the experience, just seeing all the underwater creatures was amazing, but we knew that we wanted to add something more than just being able to see them. So actually, the whole experience is guided by 2 explorers. It's packed full of pirates and adventures, and actually you collect all of the fish and the underwater sea life, and you begin to learn about them. So what we enabled was kids to have a great experience and parents to feel really good about it, because they actually ended up at the other end of their journey learning all about the octopus or the dolphin or the whale. So it was a really great kind of way to educate, but in a fun kind of learning way. And what was amazing is we crafted all of the creatures. So now I look at this, and since then Eurostar have been working very closely with brands like Disney to try and bring some of the much loved IP. For example, did you notice the little girl was like, "It's Ariel," but it wasn't Ariel. So brands that kids love, you can imagine Nemo and all of these characters that are so much loved being part of this experience. But we created all of these characters and all of these animations from scratch. So there's a cheeky octopus there that is very charismatic, and you have these interactions with him. So it's been carefully crafted by a team of designers, and again, we hired game designers, we hired artists and animators to really bring these characters to life. So you're not just observing them, but you feel very connected to them. Each of the landscapes and all of the underwater scenes were carefully crafted together so that it felt very cinematic and the visual quality was high. So they felt that they were learning more about the journey on the way, which was very different because people often are only excited about the destination. This turned the journey into an adventure, which was a huge kind of pivotal moment for them. And adding the gaming element allowed kids to really get excited about it. Now, for Eurostar, Odyssey experience was amazing. This was supposed to be a one-off experience. We really responded to that little insight and created something that was compelling, but now actually it's created the foundation for VR experiences for the Eurostar in the future. So that's been the kind of crux of what we want to do with the work that we create something that is built to live, not built to die, something that adds value, something that a brand can now use and turn this into, and not just for kids. I mean, even the whole way through this, we were like, this is kind of cool for parents too. And you can see how the storytelling and the narrative can change as the age group increases. So VR really truly is this amazing medium, and it really has this ability to, it offers this kind of limitless creativity and innovation, but it's still relatively very new. And I still have to remind people that we're still in the very early days of VR. It has the power to shape experiences far beyond what we can imagine, especially when we've been used to working with mediums like radio and TV, or even the web, or even the mobile phone that you have in your hand. Because what VR does is eliminates the real world from you. And when you're in a VR experience, I have your undivided attention. So the goal is we have to make sure that that experience and that interaction is something of value. Otherwise, you're never going to reach out for another VR experience. It's sending kind of shockwaves through the marketing industry and the advertising industry, and brands have been very quick to kind of jump on and create experiences because people are excited about this new technology and they want to try it. And I really feel like it's one of the first new pieces of technology that is a medium, which means that as a medium, there's still a whole language that we need to explore and learn about it. And that within this medium, it means that there's a whole language around the technology and then also around the storytelling that we need to learn and navigate. Now, this is a slide that I always giggle at when I put up on the talk, and I shared this with the students this morning, because every time I put it up, I have to add a new headset because the hardware is advancing at such an incredible pace, I can barely keep up, let alone consumers. Some of the hardware on this screen is now obsolete, only out a year and it's obsolete already. Discontinued, no longer needed. It's almost like a minefield. Hundreds of headsets, hundreds of phones, cameras, 360 camera systems are coming into the market. And it can be quite an overwhelming time. So imagine what that's like for brands or clients or even consumers trying to understand or navigate this space. There is very much a steep learning curve, but for me, the conversation is less around the hardware, because they absolutely have this covered. In the time when I first opened up that Magic Box and it was this clunky kind of headset that we put on, to now the Magic Leap headset, which is just, no bigger than the glasses that you are wearing now. In 6 years, the technology and the hardware has advanced at such an incredible pace, and the price point is coming down so quickly that I absolutely fundamentally believe in the next few years this will get cheaper and more affordable. So actually, for me, the conversation should be around here in terms of the content. What about the content? Now, we've seen some groundbreaking experiences in the VR space, and these are just a sprinkle of some of my favorites. If you haven't tried some of these, I would really encourage you to, there's an amazing VR lab that the team have set up here. You have all of the equipment. Go and try some of these experiences, because they will fundamentally change the way you think about what immersion is, what interaction is, and what creating a memorable experiences is all about. Everything from the Void experience, which is Ghostbusters up in the top left, where a group of 4 individuals can go into a location-based experience. You're not tethered to any PC or device. You have a backpack on, which is essentially your proton pack, and you can actually go and catch ghosts and be a Ghostbuster and kill Marshmallow Man. Who doesn't want to do that, right? And then everything down to even Wolves in the Wall, which is a recent experience done, which uses AI, which allows you to have this interaction with this girl called Lucy. Lucy acknowledges your existence, and you actually help Lucy discover the wolves in the wall. It's 2 very different experiences, 2 very different ways of telling a story and being part of the story. So there's a huge opportunity. What VR has done in the past few years is really push this conversation forward, and you would have heard it multiple times. What does storytelling mean in VR? How do you tell a story in VR? And those were some of the questions that the students were firing at me in the session in the morning. As I said, we're still in the very early days. We're still learning and defining this whole narrative around what the language of VR is. And it's really important to understand that because we are in the early days, what we need is this era of exploration and experimentation, because it hasn't gone mainstream yet, and it won't go mainstream for a while. So what does that mean? That means that we're in the early phases of a brand new medium, and it's super exciting to be in that space, because there are no rules set. There are only what you define as what is a good experience. So everybody has the opportunity to be a creator in VR, whether your background is storytelling, directing, writing, performance, or even animation. We actually need all of those skill sets to come together to explore and experiment, and for everybody to try the experiences and make their own informed opinion of what's good and what's amazing and what's mediocre. So with this revolution taking shape, it also poses its own set of challenges. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we've entered this era where VR and these immersive mediums are fundamentally changing the way we work, the way we think about a story, the way we think about experiences, and the way we think about writing a story. It's making brands think about the way they interact with their consumers, and it's making storytellers and writers imagine completely new forms of storytelling, of engagement and interactions. And for me, that's super exciting. But the challenges are the technology is still new, the hardware is changing all the time, and it's very much this experimental stage. If that's something that you love being part of and you embrace that chaos, then you have the opportunity to really define the future of this medium, because it's the Wild West out there. It's anybody's game. And as VR continues to evolve, for me, the question is not about the hardware. For me, the question is, if you really want to understand a medium, you have to understand its strengths and its weaknesses. Only then can you define what storytelling means in VR. Only then can you truly define this language and this narrative. And so for me, the question is, what makes VR a distinct medium for storytelling? What allows VR to create that emotional connection? What works well and what doesn't work well? And what can we challenge and push? So as creators, we want to produce experiences that are memorable, experiences that excite you, experiences that you want to reach out and do over and over again. So what's the secret sauce to that? And right now, nobody knows. But what you are seeing is this era of new experiences, new individuals coming into the space and trying to create these experiences and seeing what really resonates. And we're questioning and we're challenging and we're exploring these opportunities. The key for me is understanding the space as much as you can. Think of yourself as a sponge at this moment and absorb as much as you can about VR. Take everything you know about the industry that you've come from. So for me, being a digital creative director, everything that I've learnt, I apply to this medium. And that enables me to think and challenge about what is next then for the medium. And for me, looking at the early days of cinema is a really, really good example of where we are right now. Often the question, so someone said to me the other day, has VR died? And I was like, what are you talking about? It's barely just begun. There's a lot of articles that you'll read out there. You know, VR is dead, AR is here. You know, don't worry about it all. It's all just noise. It's all just, you know, the media, just trying to find something to latch onto. How I compare it to the early days of cinema, I think there are a lot of important takeaways we can learn from. So in the early days, the very first kind of cinema piece was done by the Lumineers brothers, which I'm sure you're all aware of. And I normally have it in my video, but I've played it so much. I just love playing George Méliès, and I'll get to George Méliès in a second. But the arrival of the train was a groundbreaking piece of film. Essentially, in a theatre like this, was with probably about this many individuals, the Lumineer brothers played the arrival of the train. It was a train pulling into a station. People had never seen moving image at this time, so they thought the train was going to hit them. They got up and, well, they didn't get, they ran out of that theatre screaming and shouting. Was that any different to me falling off the stool when I was on the roller coaster? No. We are very much in the Lumineers brothers stage of VR, because it's quite literal right now. The technology is clunky, as in the early days of cinema. As an artist, as a filmmaker, as a director, they could only use the tools that were available to them. But, and the reason why this film is playing, it was only a few years after the Lumineer brothers' arrival of the train that George Méliès made this film. It's one of the most groundbreaking, and actually it's probably the birth, and he's probably the godfather of visual effects. He made this film. He took those same tools, but imagined this whole story and whole scenario so creative, so imaginary, so groundbreaking, that when people saw this, they saw the possibilities of what moving image could do. That's where we are with VR. Now, we haven't quite reached our Citizen Kane, but we are absolutely on our way there. So the question actually is not about, is VR dead? Is AR taking over VR? Has it gone mainstream? How much money can I make from it? The question is, will you be ready for the age of immersion? That is the question you need to ask yourself. How can you be ready? How can you prepare yourself for this time and this stage of experimentation? How can you be part of that conversation? The future of VR for me lies in delivering content that makes it indispensable. That iPhone, when the iPhone launched, was a revolutionary piece of technology. Remember those first few apps that came out? Some were so bad. Like some apps were like, I'm sure there was one app where you just hold your finger on a button and see how long you can hold it on there for. It's like useless, utterly useless. But it wasn't until people start developing apps that fundamentally changed our lives. Now, how many of you can truly say that if you left the house without your phone, you wouldn't go back for it? Because I cannot exist without my phone. And it becomes a fundamental part of your life because it has tools on there that enable you to live your life better. Right now, VR is still at an early stage. It's great for gaming, no doubt. The entertainment space has absolutely embraced it. But what else? What else are we going to see VR used for, and what will it enable you to do in the future? That is the question. So VR really does force you to think outside of your comfort zone. If you love projects where, the storyboard is fixed, the script is locked down, everything is defined, VR might not be the space for you. It is chaotic. It is problem solving after problem solving. It is true collaboration, not pretend collaboration. It is true collaboration. It is feisty arguments to solve problems between different disciplines. It's fighting for the right thing at the right time. And it's getting your team to understand the goal and all trying to hit it within an 8-week time frame and a certain budget. So it's challenging. But if you love that, and when you see people take their VR headset or after doing your experience and the way it's impacted them, there's nothing more exciting than that. So I wanted to wrap this with sharing some of the things that I think will arm you in being ready for this age of immersion. And these are all, and one of the things I said to the students, there are no experts in this space. Don't let anybody fool you, because how can they be experts in this space when it's still so new? Everything is changing. There are times when I've pitched ideas to a client and said, absolutely, we cannot do that. Technology doesn't allow. And then the next day, my developer's like, they did an update, we can do that. I'm like, pick up the phone. So that thing we said we couldn't do, we actually can do. Great. And it's moving at such a pace where it challenges the way you think, the way you create as a team. And it's super important to remember that anyone in here could create the killer app for VR. Anyone here could create the next Citizen Kane. It's just about imagining what those possibilities are, picking up the medium and experimenting with it. So it's only about lessons learned. There are no experts. What I'm sharing with you is all the times we've failed and what we learned from that, so that you're not starting from scratch. In 2012, even we weren't starting from scratch because VR was not new at the time. We looked 50 years earlier, and the very early pioneers of VR had written loads and loads of books and papers, albeit a lot of it was written and not practiced because the technology didn't enable it. But if you look back at the very early VR pioneers, their theories and their philosophies around suspending disbelief and interaction in VR still resonate today. So we didn't really have to learn from scratch, and neither do you. So here are a few lessons learned. I wouldn't say this is the secret sauce. It's almost very much common sense, but you can call it the secret sauce if you like. So the most important thing as you step into creating a VR project or an immersive reality project, in this new dimension of possibilities, you absolutely need to build diverse, multidisciplinary teams. Now I say that and pause because often we think, we are collaborative. And we do have multi-diverse disciplinary teams. And I say, do you truly? Because a lot of the projects that we have created we wouldn't have been able to solve those problems if there wasn't a diverse skill set in that team. We have architects. I would never imagine, as a digital creative director, hiring an architect. Why would I need an architect on a VR project? But the reason we hired this young individual is because of the way they thought about moving through space and the way you can use that thinking and user experience of moving through a physical space into a VR experience. We have psychologists, we have animators, modelers, developers. The gaming industry has been a tremendous learning curve for us. I mean, the game developers have been developing story arcs for a number of years. Translating that into VR and learning from that, super powerful. And then theatrical performers. I never thought we would have theatrical writers working with us on a project to help us define what makes a good performance. I described this earlier on to the team. It's the same as when you imagine going to the cinema and just like this, you're watching Hamlet on the screen, right? You watch Hamlet, it's kind of cool. Now imagine the same story but at the Shakespeare Globe Theatre. Completely different experience. Each of you will take away something different because there is an actor there is a performance happening. What you take from it and where you look is completely different to where you will look. VR is very much similar. So there were so many learnings we were taking, and that's what I mean about collaboration and multidisciplinary teams. Don't be afraid to hire the experts within their fields and bring them together. And honestly, you know what happens? Magic happens. There is no way I, as a creative director, would have been able to solve half of the hurdles that we came up against. You know, my sound engineer would be like, we've got limited time, we can't do this. And I'd be like, how are we going to solve this? Users aren't looking this way. And my sound engineer would be like, oh, that's easy. We'll just drop a sound over there that will steer their attention over there. And we all look at him, we're like, amazing. A little bit of code, a little bit of sound, problem solved. Or how you can use light within a 360 space to draw somebody's attention rather than having to build multiple 3D models and objects or pointing a big arrow, look over here. There are so many different ways to solve for these challenges. And honestly, there's not been a day that I don't go home so proud of the team and so in awe of them. And that is the goal, where you are in a team where you feel like you're learning from them as much as they are from you. So surround yourself with, I call them, assemble a team of problem solvers, problem makers, challengers, argumentative thinkers. Those are the people who will speak up when something isn't quite right, but also have a solution. Because you just don't want someone always saying, well, this isn't working. What you want is a team that says, this isn't working, here's how we think we can solve it, or what if we try this? That's what you need. So super important, surround yourself with amazing, smart thinkers. And then when we're in VR right now, really, really have to think about what storytelling actually means. For me, I think the challenge is to build something new. We have to really step away from what we know. We've been very constrained by traditional ways of storytelling, and we're trying to shoehorn that into VR. We have to move away from telling the story, because in VR, you're no longer being told a story, you are living that story. There is no camera in VR, you are the camera. So what does that mean? What challenges does that pose to you as a team, and how do you tell a story? This example is actually the Void VR experience. I'm not sure if any of you have the opportunity to try it. Anyone? No? Oh, a few people, cool. So they were in Westfield. Not the greatest place to have an experience, but it was an amazing experience that they put up. They were in Westfield last year or the year before, and they done this amazing experience off the back of the success of Ghostbusters, where 4 people could be a Ghostbuster and go in and grab Slimer and shoot at Marshmallow Man. They built this Star Wars experience with Star Wars, which was great with Lucasfilms. You are able to step into the narrative of the movie. At the time, Rogue One was in cinemas. In this experience, and I was lucky enough to do the experience, and I took my 2 sons with me and my husband. All of us went. We're a huge Star Wars family, huge Star Wars fan. Went into the experience. We were all stormtroopers. Darth Vader's there. You have a lightsaber. You've got to save the day. You're shooting. It was amazing. It's a physical space built that mimics the virtual space. I wasn't being told a story. I was in the story. I was living it. It was a great way to really think about how VR can be used to really enhance a story that you might see in the theatre and then a story that you might go experience. So don't think about it as storytelling, think about it as story living. And for me, it's really quite amazing the era we're in now, because I don't know about you guys, or I remember as a kid watching Star Wars with my dad. It would come on the TV. I'm showing how old I am. Like Channel 4 would have Star Wars on. It'd be amazing. We'd sit there, we'd watch it, play lightsaber duels with my dad. It was great. And now, as a parent, I can take my son to not only watch it in the theatre, but now be part of it. He has now experienced Star Wars in a completely new way, in a way that we have never experienced before. So how will his generation experience movies after that? They will actually be in the movies and part of that narrative. It's a really exciting time. And so think about the fact that you are now the camera in VR and the center of that experience, and how that shifts from telling a story and being told a story to living it and being part of it. And then to really harness the power of VR, as I said earlier, you have to understand its strengths and its weaknesses. By doing that, you can really create experiences that really truly resonate. And for me, the holy grail is participation and presence. And presence is something that you would have heard multiple times. Any VR article will talk about the golden chalice of VR is presence. What that means is truly making somebody believe that they are there in that virtual world that you created. You know, and there are multiple different ways to gain presence, but participation is a great way of doing that. Having somebody be involved in your story, enabling them to interact with that world. In this experience, this is called Eyes of an Animal, and it's made by Marshmallow Laser Feast. And you actually get to experience a forest through the eyes of a flying insect. It's so interesting and so profound, and only VR could do this. And it's so mesmerizingly beautiful. I remember the first time I tried this, I was like, whoa! You know, there's things that you get when people say, if you could be an animal, what animal would you be? I was like, whoa, I kind of want to be I have never said I want to be a bug flying through a forest. After doing this, I was like, this is pretty cool. It's amazing what these creatures can see, but only VR enables you to actually truly experience that. So think about participation, embodiment, think about presence. There is this test that you can do in VR, and some of the students know about the tennis ball test, the golf ball test, or throwing the ball test. So next time you're in a VR experience and you want to garner whether, you know, you feel like this is a benchmark of a really good experience or a mediocre experience, the virtual ball test is very simple. When you are in a VR experience, was it so good? Could you suspend disbelief so much to the point that if a virtual ball was heading at you, you would physically duck because you felt it was real? That is when you have truly suspended someone's disbelief. That's when you have tricked them into thinking they are where they are. Now, when I was in the Void experience, 100% when those lightsabers were coming at me, I was ducking, I was diving, I was doing things that you weren't even supposed to do in the experience, because I was like, oh, should I jump off this, should I jump off the spaceship and jump onto the Millennium Falcon? And then the guy tapped me and was like, you can't do that. I'm like, oh, okay. Because I had totally immersed myself into the story and completely wanted to do those things. So participation and presence really is really important. And the way you get to that when you're creating an experience is putting yourself into the experience and testing it. What is the natural thing that you try to do? If you create an experience and you try to reach out for something, then let people physically reach out and let people reach out and grab it virtually as well. Often where VR fails is when we try to do something that we would naturally do and you can't pick up that object. The moment that happens, your brain kicks in and it goes, this is fake, this isn't real, you're in VR, you're in a headset, come out of it. And that's what we want to try and avoid. And some of the best experiences out there suspend your disbelief so much that you actually don't want to come out of the headset, and it's so amazing. Participation is very powerful in creating that holy grail. And then ultimately, to make any idea impactful, whether it's on radio, whether it's on TV, you know, why do we have our favorite movies? Why do we have our favorite experiences? Is the emotional connection it can create. Now that is something that VR it's one of its greatest strengths. It's been called the empathy machine. It's been called, you know, many things, a creator's imagination tool. But it really, truly does, when the VR experience is done well, it truly creates an emotional connection between its audience and the subject. So this example is one of the most powerful VR experiences I have ever tried. And I've tried a lot in the past 6 years, and I make it absolutely my goal to try as much content as possible, so I can see not only what people are doing, but the ways people are exploring the medium and what can be done. If you ever get to try this experience, I absolutely wholeheartedly would say cancel everything, every plan that you have, and get tickets to this. It's a one-man experience. That's my only critique of it. It's a location-based experience. I tried it in LACMA Museum in LA. We kind of blagged our way in. We pretended we were press, and we said, could we get some tickets? They were like, yeah, you're press, totally, get in. we got in, we tried it, and it was amazing. It was done by Alejandro Itru, who is the director of Birdman. And the reason why I talk about this is he'd never done VR before. He's an amazing director, obviously, but he started with an idea. And his goal was, I want to create something that truly tells a story of immigrants and refugees. So this experience is called Carnarina, and it translates as flesh and sand. And for him, he didn't want to create another film. I mean, that would be, I wouldn't say easy, but that would be natural for him to do as a director, create another film. He actually tried VR and felt that VR would be the perfect medium to truly make people feel what it's like to be an immigrant and a refugee. Because he really felt that, you know, TV, we become desensitized to it. We hear these stories and they don't mean anything because there's no emotional connection between me and that individual on the other side of the screen. But in VR, you can absolutely change that. So when I tried this experience, he did a number of things that are almost all the things that I've just talked about. He just hit the nail right on the head. It was a physical experience in a room, I would say 4 times the size of this, hence why it's touring and it's somewhere in the world at the moment, but hence why it's a very difficult kind of experience to go and do. One person goes in at a time. You go into what is first a room. It's very cold. You take your shoes off and you put them into a locker, and you're kind of not quite sure if the experience has started, and you kind of think, oh, is this one of those punch drunk things? Has it started? Has it not started? There's no one there to guide you through it. You're kind of taken through it. The floor is very cold. Obviously, you've just taken your shoes and socks off. And suddenly what I noticed is in this little room, there's a bench. It's very cold. It's purposefully cold. And then there are shoes all around the room in the corner and these makeshift water bottles. And you sit there for a little while and then you realize, oh, I think this already started. So I got up and I was like, well, I'm going to start looking around. And what you realize is written up on the wall is these are shoes from the Mexican border. These are shoes from real people, real children. These are real makeshift water bottles that people that didn't make it across. And suddenly, okay, it got me at that point. And it's cold in the room because that's what the detention center is like. And then you hear an alarm and the alarm goes off and you step out. And as I stepped out, I step onto sand. Alejandro brought sand from the Mexican border, exactly the same sand. The corrugated gate that was surrounding the experience. And the room is very much like this. It's a foggy room. There's sand on my feet. And I step into the middle and they pop a VR headset on me and bam, I'm on the Mexican border. There's no one else around. And it has been one of the most mesmerizing and unforgettable experiences I've had. Of all the stories I've seen on the news, of all the charities that we've spoken to after this, I have donated not only to refugees and immigrants, but made it a personal kind of mission to understand more about it and do something because it had such an impact on me. And from a creative and professional point of view, I am so in awe of what he did. When you're in the experience, you are not a passive observer, you are a refugee and an immigrant, and you encounter individuals trying to cross the border. They don't make it across. Each individual that you counter is a real person, a real human being. You're able to walk around completely freely. There's no story being given to me. I can explore any story that I want. I could bend down and crouch next to the child or next to the lady with her child. There was an old man that couldn't walk. And I knew the whole time, this is a VR experience. Because I work in VR, I know this isn't real, but it felt so real. And there's an old man, the younger man helping an old man, and he falls, and I run over to help. And I'm like, what am I doing? And what I didn't realize is I walked right through them. And when I walked right through them, their heart appeared, and their heart crossed with my heart. It was phenomenal, phenomenal. And it's such a simple way to use the medium. There's no narration. There's no telling you about what they want you to do. They didn't ask me to donate afterwards. But that's how powerful this can be. That is my example of when someone says, what is VR good for? What can you use it for? That is the power of this medium. you can absolutely use it to change your perception of the world and change the world. And it takes great storytellers and it takes great courage to do that. And so for me, as I said, we're not quite at our Citizen Kane, but this is pretty close. So VR is impacting not just filmmakers, not just artists and storytellers and students like yourself, it's also impacting other sectors. Now, a lot of people think VR is all about gaming, but what they're not seeing is in the past 5 years, we've seen this tremendous explosion of VR being used across all mediums and categories. It's often thought that this is just a technology, but for me, when a technology is being used in training, in entertainment, in sports, in medicine, and in therapy, in education, it's no longer a technology. It is a whole new platform. Now, some of these experiences are super exciting. So the Army, for example, bottom middle, there's a company called BraveMind. It's been around for over 12 to 13 years. It's run by this amazing charismatic guy called Skip Rizzo. Skip has been using VR to help Army soldiers, to help treat soldiers for post-traumatic stress. And it's working. That's the power of this medium, not only to entertain you, not only to inform you, but to heal you. And also the NFL, believe it or not, top left, have been using VR to help train their athletes. So that has a huge impact on the whole kind of sports spectrum, as how you can use it to help athletes improve and perform better. And then one of my favorites is down in the bottom left is VR's transforming education. Now, I don't know about some of you guys, and even here in the classrooms today, but when I was in high school, I used to find history so boring. But imagine now with Google Expeditions, you can transform the pages in a book. You can transport children right into Egypt and learn about the pyramids and move around and see that come to life. Their Expeditions project is actually taking their Google cardboard headsets around the world to enable not only children here, but also children in third world countries to see and explore the world in ways that they never imagined. You see Vive headsets and Oculus headsets now in the classroom. Imagine biology class where you had to learn about all the organs. Well, you don't have to worry about reading that in a book. You can absolutely have it right in front of you, pull it apart, and then pull it all back together again. How does that transform education? How does it make it more memorable? I remember recently we'd moved to America with my kids, and they were learning American history, and I was like, I know nothing about American history. How am I going to help them with their homework? And I remember, seeing this VR experience, which was all about the American Revolution. I was like, this is great. So when my son said, Mum, help me with this history homework, I went, don't need to do that. Just put on this VR headset. So he pops on the headset and he's like, that's brilliant. Why don't we have that in classrooms? And I was like, you're right. Why don't we have that in classrooms? And it made me think about education and learning. Imagine you could go home today, pop on your VR headset and learn a whole new language. Your Spanish teacher available to you, but the scene is not set here in the classroom or at home in your living room. It's set in Spain. It's set with the right mood and the right atmosphere, and you can actually have a conversation not only with your teacher, but then they can set the scene and scenario. And classic, my French teacher was like this: imagine you go into a cafe in Paris, you need to order a croissant and a cup of tea. How would you do that? But imagine all of that comes to life. How will that change the way we learn? How will it change the way we educate our generation now and educate our generation in the future? So you can see why I get so excited about VR, because when someone says, hey Resh, isn't VR just about gaming? I'm like, oh, let me show you this slide. Of course it's not. So when you are doing your work and your projects, or you're thinking about what are you passionate about, what do you want to create, VR enables you to create in any one of these spaces, and it's revolutionizing medicine. I'm not sure if you've encountered this individual called the virtual surgeon. The virtual surgeon is actually Sharif Ahmed. He's a very good friend of mine. He has revolutionized the medical industry. Does he come from a creative background? Is he a storyteller? Is he a writer? Is he a student? No. He actually saves lives. He's a surgeon at St. Bart's Hospital. Why did he use VR? Exactly the way Alejandro Ituro did. He wanted to solve a problem that he was having. Alejandro wanted you to really feel what it was like to be a refugee. Sharif Ahmed wanted to change the way medicine was taught. He said he would do these this gets a bit gory, he would do these operations, students would crowd around. Imagine all of us trying to crowd around, trying to get a good view. I would have no chance. I'm tiny. I would be right at the back, wouldn't see anything. What did I learn for the day? Nothing. So what he actually did is when he saw VR, and he actually thought, that's a great way for me to change how I'm teaching my students. He took all of the students out into a separate room, placed a camera right above where he was operating, gave them all a VR headset, and they all had the best seat in the house. He then realized that as a neurosurgeon and a doctor at St. Bart's, he comes with great privilege and great knowledge. He wanted to enable doctors in third world countries that could not afford or access his knowledge to also have a VR headset and learn exactly what he was teaching his students at St. Bart's. So he's created a VR app that allows doctors to access that knowledge and that expertise without the expense, which is fundamentally changing the way you do medicine. So when we think about VR, don't think about it as a gaming platform, because it's really great for that. Think about it as a tool that will enable you to change the way you learn, you play, you interact, you teach, and the way you can engage. So finally, just to wrap up, for me, ultimately, the technology really 100% has caught up to the dream. Over 60, 70 years ago, the very early VR pioneers had absolutely the right idea, but the technology didn't really work. It was really clunky. It didn't live up to the dream. Now, the technology has caught up. It's really good, and it's only getting better. It wasn't long ago, in 2016, Zuckerberg gets up on his Facebook conference, and he has an image up on the screen, and it's a pair of spectacles, like your spectacles now, and he says, in the future, VR and AR is going to be as thin as a pair of Ray-Bans. And he said, in 10 years, that's going to happen. It's 2018, and Magic Leap launched their Magic Leap Creators One headset. It's not quite as thin as your spectacles now, but 2 years later, we're already down to a pair of glasses that you can pop on your head and experience this virtual world. The challenge for us, really, is the content now has to live up to that dream. So you, as content creators and content makers, as those students that are going to step out and imagine what you could do with this new medium, the responsibility really lies in your lap. What are you going to create that's really going to make people reach out and pick up that headset? It's a super pioneering time, and it is scary. It is scary, but for all the right reasons. I remember my very first creative director, well, he was actually the founder of AKQA, and his name is James Hilton. James said to me, Resh, whenever you're working on a project, if you're not half scared out of your life and half excited, then you're doing something wrong. And in this space, you will be half excited and half completely scared out of your life, because you'll be like, how do we figure this out? But somewhere along that journey, you'll create experiences that completely mesmerize people, completely change a whole category, and then you'll realize why it's absolutely worth it to keep experimenting and keep pushing. So for me, I've just shared with you a little bit of a glimpse about what we can expect from the space and how it's radically changing the way we play, the way we communicate. And for me, the future for this medium really truly lies in making content that makes it indispensable. Don't worry about the hardware. Don't worry about is it dead? Is AR better than VR? Think about what you can make with it, because really what you have, just like in 2012, you have a magic box of delights. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Thank you.